The wind screamed as Elara's body plunged toward the rocks below, her stepmother's cold smile the last thing she saw before the world tilted into chaos. One push. One moment. That's all it took for Maris Vance to try and erase the girl who stood between her and absolute power. But fate had other plans. A hand shot out through the salt spray air, iron-strong fingers closing around Elara's wrist as she hung suspended between life and death. The Duke had been watching, and he refused to let her fall. Stay with us until the very end to see how a girl left for dead became the woman no one could ever destroy again. Hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. The Vance estate clung to the cliffs like a predator to its prey, all sharp edges and dark stone, constantly battered by winds that howled in from the northern sea. It was a fortress designed to withstand storms, but inside its walls, a different kind of tempest had been brewing for years. Elara Vance moved through the manor like a ghost, her footsteps silent on the cold marble floors. At 22, she had perfected the art of invisibility. It was a survival skill learned through necessity, honed through countless nights of going to bed hungry because she'd arrived 30 seconds late to dinner, refined through winters spent shivering in an unheated room because her stepmother deemed firewood a privilege for those who contribute to this household. She hadn't always been this way, this hollow, careful thing. There were fragments of memory, golden and distant, of a time before her father remarried, before cancer took her mother when Elara was only 7, before Gregory Vance, desperate in his grief and terrible with loneliness, brought Maris Thornwell into their home as his new bride. That had been 15 years ago. Her father had been dead for 3. "Elara!" The voice cut through the morning silence like a blade. "Where is my breakfast? I've been waiting for 20 minutes." Maris Vance stood at the top of the grand staircase, a vision of calculated beauty in a deep burgundy dress that cost more than most families earned in a year. At 45, she maintained her looks with the same ruthless efficiency she applied to everything else in her life. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elaborate style that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and ice-blue eyes, eyes that could freeze water in July. "I'm sorry, Mother," Elara said quietly, the word mother tasting like ash on her tongue. "Cook is ill this morning. I was preparing—" "Excuses." Maris descended the stairs with predatory grace. "Always excuses with you. Do you know what I sacrificed to raise you after your father died? The opportunities I gave up? And this is how you repay me. With cold tea and tardiness." Elara kept her eyes lowered, her hands clasped in front of her worn gray dress. It was a dress she'd owned for 5 years, mended so many times the original fabric was barely visible beneath the patches. Meanwhile, Maris's wardrobe overflowed with silks and velvets, all purchased with the fortune Elara's father had left behind. The fortune that legally belonged to Elara herself, held in trust until her 25th birthday. 3 more years. Just 3 more years, and she could leave this place forever, if she survived that long. "I'll have it ready in 5 minutes," Elara said, turning toward the kitchen. Maris's hand shot out, gripping Elara's arm with surprising strength. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into flesh through the thin fabric. "You'll have it ready in 2. And Elara, fix your hair. We have important visitors arriving this afternoon, and I won't have you looking like some rag-picker's daughter." The irony wasn't lost on Elara. Maris dressed her in rags, then criticized her appearance, fed her scraps, then mocked her thinness, isolated her from society, then blamed her for being unmarriageable. It was a game Maris played with expert precision, and Elara had learned long ago that the only way to win was not to play at all. Survive. Endure. Wait. "Yes, Mother." Maris released her with a dismissive gesture, and Elara hurried to the kitchen, her arm already beginning to bruise. The kitchen was her sanctuary, the one place in the vast estate where she could breathe. Mrs. Hawthorne, the elderly cook who had served the Vance family for 40 years, was indeed ill, but not so ill that she hadn't left detailed instructions for the morning meal. "She knew," Elara whispered to herself, reading the note propped against the flour tin, Mrs. Hawthorne always knew when Maris was planning something. The old woman had seen too much, survived too many of Maris's moods to be caught unaware. "Elara, dear, I've prepared the batter for her ladyship's favorite scones. They only need baking. The tea is already steeping in the good pot. Don't let her see you shake. She feeds on fear." Elara's hands trembled slightly as she slid the scones into the oven. Not from fear, not anymore. From rage. A cold, quiet fury that had been building for 15 years, compressed so tightly within her chest that sometimes she wondered if she might shatter from the pressure of containing it. But rage was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. The visitors arrived at precisely 2 o'clock, their carriages crunching up the long gravel drive. Elara watched from her small third-floor window, half hidden behind faded curtains, as Maris transformed into the perfect hostess, all gracious smiles and elegant gestures. Lady Cordelia Ashworth emerged first, her daughter Vivian trailing behind in a cloud of expensive perfume and rustling silk. The Ashworths were old money, their influence stretching back generations. Maris had been courting their favor for months. The second carriage was unfamiliar, black lacquered wood with a crest Elara didn't recognize. A silver hawk in flight, wings spread against a midnight field. Her breath caught. She knew that crest. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew it. The Duke of Thornmere had come to call. Rowan Hale stepped from the carriage with the kind of presence that made the very air seem to shift around him. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with a warrior's economy of motion, each gesture precise and purposeful. His dark hair was longer than fashion dictated, pulled back carelessly at the nape of his neck. Even from this distance, Elara could see the scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. A souvenir, rumor said, from the border wars that had raged 5 years ago. He was 31, unmarried, and according to the gossip that filtered even into Elara's isolated existence, had returned to civilization only 6 months prior after years of self-imposed exile in his northern fortress. And now he was here. Maris practically glowed with triumph as she welcomed him, her hand lingering on his arm just a moment too long. Elara could read her stepmother's thoughts as clearly as if they were written across the sky. This was the opportunity Maris had been waiting for. The Duke of Thornmere was one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in the realm. A connection to him could elevate the Vance name from respectable to untouchable. But there was a problem. The Duke needed a wife. And Maris, for all her beauty and cunning, was already married. A widow, yes, but her status was complicated by the fact that she controlled the Vance estate only through Elara's minority. Once Elara came of age, the fortune would transfer, unless Maris could find a way to secure her position permanently. Elara's stomach twisted as she watched Vivian Ashworth smile coyly at the Duke, saw Maris gesture toward the house with proprietorial pride. She should go downstairs, should present herself, should at least try to be part of the social fabric of her own home. But the thought of facing those people, of seeing the pity or contempt in their eyes when they looked at her shabby dress and tired face, made her want to sink into the floor and disappear. "Elara!" Maris's voice rang out from below. "Come down this instant." There was no choice. She descended the servants' staircase and entered the drawing room through the side door, trying to make herself as small as possible. "Ah, there you are." Maris's smile was venomous honey. "Ladies, your grace, allow me to introduce my stepdaughter, Elara. She's been unwell lately. The sea air doesn't agree with everyone." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Unwell, as if illness were the reason for Elara's hollow cheeks and worn clothing, rather than systematic neglect. Lady Ashworth barely glanced at her. Vivian's eyes swept over Elara with the dismissive assessment of someone cataloging insignificant obstacles. But the Duke? Rowan Hale looked at her, really looked. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray shot through with silver, and for a moment Elara felt pinned beneath that gaze like a butterfly on a collector's board. He didn't smile, didn't speak, but something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or something darker. Then he turned back to Maris, and the moment shattered. "Your home is quite impressive, Lady Vance," he said, his voice deep and measured. "The cliffside position is dramatic." "My late husband chose it specifically," Maris purred. "He said a man should live where he can see both his domain and his enemies approaching." Wise man. Indeed, though tragically wisdom couldn't protect him from illness. Maris sighed delicately. "It's been so difficult managing the estate alone. If only I had a strong partner." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Lady Ashworth cleared her throat pointedly, drawing attention back to Vivian. Elara stood frozen by the door, neither dismissed nor acknowledged, existing in that liminal space Maris loved to trap her in, present enough to be humiliated, invisible enough to be ignored. The conversation turned to hunting, to the social season, to matters of politics and property that swirled around Elara without touching her. She was about to risk slipping away when Maris's voice arrested her. "Elara, dear, pour the tea." It was a test. It was always a test. The tea service sat on a table near the Duke, fine porcelain painted with delicate roses. Elara's hands were steady as she lifted the pot. Years of practice had taught her to control the trembling. But as she leaned forward to fill the Duke's cup, Maris shifted in her seat. Just a small movement, just enough. Her foot shot out, catching the leg of the small table. The tea service tilted. Elara lunged, catching the pot before it could spill, but hot tea splashed across her wrist. She bit down on her cry of pain, swallowing it whole, and managed to set the pot down safely. "Clumsy girl," Maris gasped, all concern and dismay. "Your Grace, I'm so terribly sorry. Elara has always been rather uncoordinated." "The table was bumped," Rowan said quietly. His eyes hadn't left Elara's face. "Are you hurt?" The question was so unexpected, so genuinely asked, that Elara forgot herself for a moment. She looked directly at him, meeting those storm-gray eyes, and saw something that made her heart stutter. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, this stranger knew. "I'm fine," she whispered. "See that you're more careful," Maris said sharply. "You're dismissed." Elara fled. She made it to the kitchen before her composure cracked, before the pain in her wrist and the humiliation in her chest became too much to contain. She plunged her arm under the cold water pump, hissing at the contact. "That bad, is it?" Mrs. Hawthorne had emerged from her room, still pale but steady. She took Elara's wrist in gentle hands, examining the angry red burn. "She's getting worse," the old cook said softly. "More reckless. Elara, child, I'm worried." "Only 3 more years," Elara replied, the mantra that had sustained her through countless dark nights. "Then I come into my inheritance, and I can leave." "If you survive 3 more years," Mrs. Hawthorne's eyes were grave. "That Duke, he's watching her, watching you. I saw it in his face. Everyone watches Maris. She's beautiful." "That's not the kind of watching I mean." Mrs. Hawthorne wrapped Elara's wrist with practiced efficiency. "He looked at you like a man who's found something unexpected, something valuable. I'm not valuable. I'm just here. You're worth more than every gem in your stepmother's jewelry box. And that's what terrifies her." The old woman's grip tightened. "Be careful, Elara. When a snake feels threatened, it strikes." But careful wasn't enough. It was never enough. 3 days later, Maris called Elara to her study, the room that had once been Gregory Vance's sanctuary, now repurposed as the command center of Maris's social empire. "Sit down." Maris didn't look up from the letter she was writing, her pen scratching elegant lies across expensive paper. "We need to discuss your future." Elara sat, her spine straight despite the dread pooling in her stomach. "The Duke of Thornmere is a widower," Maris began, setting down her pen with deliberate care. "His first wife died in childbirth 4 years ago. Since then, he's refused every match proposed to him. But now it seems he's decided it's time to remarry." "I see. Do you?" Maris's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I doubt it. You see, Elara, I've invested considerable resources into positioning myself, into positioning this family for this opportunity. The Duke's favor could secure our future for generations." "Your future, you mean?" The words were out before Elara could stop them. Maris's eyes flashed dangerously. "Careful, stepdaughter. You forget your place." "My place?" Something was breaking inside Elara, some final restraint snapping after years of pressure. "My place is as the daughter of Gregory Vance, heir to his fortune and this estate. My place is not as your servant, not as your—" The slap cracked across her cheek with enough force to snap her head sideways. Elara tasted blood. "Your place," Maris said, her voice deadly calm, "is exactly where I say it is. You are nothing without me. A pathetic orphan who would have starved in the streets if I hadn't generously provided for you. And if you think for one moment that you have any claim to your father's legacy, you're more deluded than I thought." Elara pressed her hand to her burning cheek, fighting back tears. Not from pain, she was used to pain, from fury, from the terrible, crushing weight of powerlessness. "I'll be 25 in 3 years," she managed. The trust can be contested. Mental incompetence. Physical frailty. 1,000 legal avenues exist to protect fortunes from unsuitable heirs. Maris leaned back in her chair, examining her nails. "But we won't need to go that route, because you're going to do exactly as I say." "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Elara's blood turned to ice. "The Duke has expressed concern about your welfare," Maris continued conversationally. "Apparently he noticed your accident with the tea. He's asked after you twice since his visit. It's inconvenient." Inconvenient. Men like Rowan Hale fancy themselves protectors, heroes. It makes them foolish and meddlesome. Maris stood, moving to the window that overlooked the cliffs. "I need him focused on suitable prospects. Vivian Ashworth, for instance. Not distracted by some wayfish charity case who reminds him of his dead wife." "I remind him of—" She was small too, dark-haired, had that same pathetic, wounded look that apparently appeals to his savior complex. Maris's reflection in the glass was cold and calculating. "But you're going to remove yourself from the equation. Tomorrow, you'll take a journey." "Where?" "Does it matter?" Maris turned, and for the first time Elara saw something truly terrifying in her stepmother's face. Not anger, not cruelty, but absolute indifference. "You'll go north to my sister's estate. She's looking for a governess for her children. You'll be useful there, at least." "And my inheritance?" "Will be handled appropriately when the time comes." Maris's smile was arctic. "If the time comes. The Northern Territories can be so dangerous. Accidents happen." The threat was unmistakable. Elara stood on shaking legs. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll make your life considerably more unpleasant than it already is. You think you've suffered? Oh, my dear child, I've been remarkably restrained." Maris moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I can make you wish you'd never been born. I can break you so thoroughly that you'll beg to leave. Or—" She paused, letting the word dangle. "Or you can go quietly, maintain some dignity, and perhaps, I'll be merciful when your 25th birthday arrives. Cooperate, and you might actually see that inheritance. Fight me, and I'll bury you in legal battles that will consume every penny and leave you destitute." It was checkmate, and they both knew it. "I need to think," Elara said hoarsely. "You have until morning. Pack your things." Maris returned to her desk, already dismissing her. "And Elara, don't get any foolish ideas about running to the Duke or anyone else. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected widow and pillar of society, or unstable girl with a history of incidents?" "What incidents?" Elara wanted to scream. The only incidents in her life had been the ones Maris orchestrated. The mysterious bruises blamed on clumsiness, the weeks confined to her room for nerves, the social isolation justified as protection from a supposedly fragile temperament. Maris had been building this narrative for years, weaving a story of an unstable, unreliable stepdaughter. And Elara, in her desperate attempts to survive, had played right into it by staying silent, by making herself invisible. She fled to her room, her mind racing. 3 years. She just needed to survive 3 more years. But could she? If Maris sent her north to some remote estate where accidents could happen without witnesses, Elara moved to her window, looking out at the sea that crashed endlessly against the cliffs. The afternoon sun turned the water to hammered silver, beautiful and deadly. She had nowhere to run. No money, no allies, no one who would believe her or help her. She was truly, completely alone. That night, sleep was impossible. Elara lay in her narrow bed, listening to the house settle around her, and thought about her father. Gregory Vance had loved her once. She had hazy memories of being lifted onto his shoulders, of his laugh rumbling through his chest as he told her stories about the sea. But grief had hollowed him out. After her mother died, he'd become a shell, desperate for someone to fill the emptiness. Maris had seen that vulnerability and exploited it with surgical precision. Had he known? At the end? When cancer ate him alive and he lay dying in the master bedroom, had he understood what he'd done to his daughter? Elara wanted to believe he'd tried to protect her. The trust fund, at least, proved he'd had some foresight. But it wasn't enough. Legal protections meant nothing if she didn't survive to claim them. A sound from below interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Voices. Muffled but agitated. Elara crept to her door and eased it open. The voices drifted up from the drawing room, Maris and someone else. A man. She shouldn't eavesdrop. It was dangerous. But something about the tension in those voices drew her forward, down the servants' stairs, until she crouched in the shadows outside the drawing room door. "Cannot keep making inquiries," Maris was hissing. "People will talk." "Let them talk," the Duke's voice. Rowan Hale was here, at night, alone with Maris. "I'm curious about your stepdaughter's welfare, Lady Vance. Surely that's natural." "Natural? There's nothing natural about your obsession with a girl you've met once." "Obsession is a strong word." "What would you call it, then? You've asked about her 3 times. You've made inquiries with the household staff. You've even sent your physician to check on her health." Maris's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "I'm beginning to think your interest is inappropriate." "Inappropriate." Rowan's tone went glacial. "I see. And the burn on her wrist? The bruises on her arms that your cook mentioned? Those are appropriate?" Silence. Then, dangerously soft. "You've been investigating me." "I've been observing. There's a difference." "Elara is clumsy, accident-prone. She has been since childhood." "She's terrified," Rowan cut in. "I've seen enough broken people to recognize one when I meet them. Your stepdaughter is being abused, and you're either the perpetrator or complicit." Elara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. He knew. He'd known from the first moment he saw her. "How dare you come into my home and make such accusations?" Maris's voice rose. "I have raised that girl, clothed her, fed her, clothed her in rags while you wear silk, fed her scraps while you feast. I'm not blind, Lady Vance, and I'm not a fool." There was movement, footsteps pacing. "I'm going to ask you once, clearly. Is Elara safe in this house?" "Of course she's safe. She's my daughter." "She's your stepdaughter, and she's coming into a substantial inheritance in 3 years, isn't she? An inheritance that you currently control." The silence that followed was deadly. "You need to leave," Maris said finally, her voice shaking with rage. "Now." "I'll leave. But understand this. I'll be watching. If anything happens to that girl, anything at all, I will bring the full weight of my power down on you. Am I clear?" "Perfectly. Good evening, Your Grace." Elara scrambled back as she heard footsteps approaching the door. She barely made it around the corner before Rowan emerged, his face set in grim lines. He paused at the threshold, and for one terrible moment she thought he'd seen her. But he simply pulled on his coat and disappeared into the night. Maris stood in the drawing room doorway, her face a mask of cold fury, and as their eyes met across the darkened hallway, Elara knew with absolute certainty she was going to die. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Elara dressed mechanically, her mind numb with dread. Maris hadn't sent for her, hadn't called her to breakfast or issued new orders. The silence was somehow worse than any confrontation. Around noon, a knock came at her door. "Miss Elara?" It was Thomas, the groundskeeper's son, barely 16 and still kind enough to be respectful. "Lady Vance requests your presence, down by the cliffs." Elara's blood went cold. "The cliffs?" "Yes, miss. She said she wants to walk with you. To talk." Talk. At the cliffs, where accidents happen. Elara's hands shook as she tied on her worn cloak. She could refuse, could lock herself in her room, but Maris would find a way. She always found a way. Better to face it now, in daylight, than to spend her life waiting for the knife to fall. She followed Thomas down the winding path that led to the cliff top. The wind whipped her hair across her face, carrying the salt spray scent of the sea and something else, something electric, like the air before lightning strikes. Maris stood at the edge, her burgundy cloak billowing dramatically. She looked like something from a painting, beautiful, terrible, utterly inhuman. "Leave us," she told Thomas. The boy hesitated, glancing at Elara with concern. But he was 16 and she was the lady of the house. He left. They were alone. "Come here, Elara." Elara moved forward on legs that felt like water, stopping a careful distance from the edge. Below, waves crashed against jagged rocks with bone-shattering force. "Closer." "I'm close enough." Maris turned, and the look on her face made Elara's breath stop. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even hatred. It was pure, cold calculation, the expression of someone solving an equation, removing an inconvenient variable. "You've ruined everything," Maris said conversationally. "Do you know that? I was so close. The Duke was interested. In me. In an alliance. And then you appeared, pathetic and broken, and triggered his ridiculous hero complex. I didn't. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. You exist. That's enough." Maris took a step forward. "I gave you a chance to leave quietly, to disappear. But you couldn't even manage that, could you? So now I have to do this the hard way." Understanding crashed over Elara like a wave. "You're going to kill me." Such dramatic language. "I'm going to remove an obstacle. You'll simply have an accident, a tragic fall. Everyone knows how unstable you are, how fragile. The grief will be terrible, of course, but the Duke will console me. He's good at consoling broken women." Her smile was poison. "And without you in the way, I'll secure the match, secure my position, and your fortune will remain exactly where it belongs, under my control. The trust can be contested by your grieving mother, who will argue that you were never mentally competent to inherit in the first place. I have doctors who will testify, witnesses who will confirm your instability." Maris tilted her head. "It's all been arranged." Elara's mind raced frantically, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. She was trapped between Maris and the cliff edge, the wind shrieking around them like a choir of damned souls. "Someone will know," she tried desperately. "The Duke suspects—" "The Duke will be devastated by the tragic loss of a girl he was trying to save. It'll make him even more dependent on my support, my understanding." Maris took another step. "Really, you're doing me a favor. Dead, you're worth far more than you ever were alive." This was it. 15 years of cruelty, of systematic destruction, all leading to this moment. Elara looked into her stepmother's eyes and saw absolutely nothing human looking back. "I won't beg," she said quietly. "I didn't expect you to." Maris lunged, her hands connected with Elara's shoulders, shoving with surprising strength. Elara's feet left solid ground. The world became a blur of gray sky and darker sea, spinning, falling, the wind screaming past her ears. A hand caught her wrist. The sudden stop nearly dislocated her shoulder. She hung suspended in space, her feet scrabbling against the cliff face, nothing but air and death below. Above her, Rowan Hale's face appeared over the edge, his expression absolutely feral. His other hand shot down, grabbing her beneath the arm, and he hauled her up with brutal efficiency. They collapsed together on solid ground, Elara's chest heaving, her entire body shaking with shock and terror. "I saw you," Rowan bit out, his hands running over her arms and shoulders, checking for injury. "I saw what she did. Are you hurt?" Elara couldn't speak, could only stare at him with wild eyes as her brain tried to process what had just happened. She'd fallen. She'd been caught. She was alive. Maris stood frozen several feet away, her face a mask of shock. But even as Elara watched, the shock transformed, not into fear or guilt, but into cold calculation. "Your Grace," Maris gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Thank heavens you arrived. Poor Elara, she was standing too close to the edge and the wind caught her cloak. I tried to grab her, but she slipped. If you hadn't been here—" "Stop!" Rowan stood, pulling Elara up with him. His arms stayed locked around her waist, as if afraid she might fall again. "I saw you push her." "Push her?" "Your Grace, you must be mistaken. I was watching from the north path. I saw everything." His voice could have cut diamonds. "You deliberately shoved your stepdaughter off a cliff." Maris's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the monster beneath. Then she laughed, a bright, brittle sound. How convenient. The noble Duke arrives just in time to save the helpless maiden. What a story. She smoothed her skirts calmly. And who do you think will believe it? A man known for his reclusive, paranoid tendencies, or a respected widow mourning what was clearly a tragic accident? You're insane, Elara whispered. I'm practical. Maris's eyes glittered dangerously. But this conversation is pointless. Your Grace, I thank you for your assistance. I'm sure Elara is very grateful. Now, if you'll excuse us, we should return to the house. My stepdaughter needs rest after her ordeal. She's not going back to that house. Rowan's grip on Elara tightened protectively. Not now. Not ever. She's my ward. You have no legal right. I have every right to prevent attempted murder when I witness it. He pulled Elara closer. And that's exactly what I witnessed. Lady Vance, you have two choices. Release Elara into my protection willingly, or I'll bring charges that will destroy you. The silence stretched between them like a blade. Finally, Maris smiled, a terrible, knowing smile. You want her? Take her. But understand what you're choosing, Your Grace. A damaged, unstable girl with no prospects, no fortune, and a history of mental fragility. She'll be a burden, not a blessing. She turned to Elara. And you, stepdaughter mine, when you come crawling back, and you will, don't expect mercy. She swept away, her cloak billowing behind her, leaving Elara and Rowan alone on the cliff top. The wind had died down. The storm clouds were passing, letting weak sunlight filter through. Elara stood in the circle of Rowan Hale's arms and realized that for the first time in 15 years she wasn't afraid. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. His voice was grim. This isn't over, not by a long shot. He was right, of course. This wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of the war. Rowan's estate stood 3 miles inland from the Vance Manor, a fortress of gray stone that rose from the windswept moors like something carved from the landscape itself. Thornmere Hall wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. It was too stark, too severe. But it radiated power, the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. Elara sat in the carriage beside him, her body still trembling from shock. Every few minutes, her hand would drift to her wrist where his fingers had caught her, as if checking to make sure it was real. That she was real. That she hadn't actually plummeted to her death on those rocks. You're safe now, Rowan said quietly. He'd said it 3 times already, as if repetition could make her believe it. She wanted to laugh. Safe. What did that word even mean anymore? She'll come after me, Elara whispered. You don't know what she's capable of. I know exactly what she's capable of. I watched her try to murder you. His jaw clenched. And she's not getting near you again. The carriage rolled through the gates of Thornmere, past guards who snapped to attention at the sight of their duke. Elara caught glimpses of their faces, curiosity, speculation, carefully hidden judgment. By nightfall, every servant in the Northern Territories would know that Rowan Hale had brought the Vance girl home. The scandal would be immediate and vicious. A stern-faced woman waited at the entrance, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She took one look at Elara's torn dress and pale face, and her expression softened fractionally. Mrs. Blackwood, this is Miss Elara Vance, Rowan said as he helped Elara down from the carriage. She'll be staying with us indefinitely. She needs a room prepared, a hot bath, and a meal. Also send for Dr. Morrison. At once, Your Grace. Mrs. Blackwood's sharp eyes catalogued every detail, the bruises on Elara's arms, the burn on her wrist, the way she swayed on her feet. Come with me, dear. Let's get you settled. Elara followed the housekeeper through corridors that felt impossibly vast after her small room at the Vance estate. Everything here was solid, real, substantial. Dark wood paneling, thick carpets that muffled footsteps. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors watching from the walls. The room Mrs. Blackwood led her to was larger than the entire servants' quarters she'd occupied for the past 15 years. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, piled with quilts that looked impossibly soft. Windows overlooked the moors, where purple heather stretched toward distant hills. The bath will be ready shortly, Mrs. Blackwood said. Is there anything you need immediately? I don't have anythings, Elara heard herself say. I left everything. We'll manage. The housekeeper's tone was brisk but not unkind. His Grace's late wife was about your size. Her wardrobe remains in storage. I'll have some items brought up. His late wife. The woman Maris claimed Elara resembled. The woman who'd died in childbirth, leaving Rowan a widower, and according to rumors, a broken man who'd retreated to his northern fortress to nurse his grief in isolation. "I'm sorry," Elara whispered, "for the intrusion, for the trouble." Mrs. Blackwood's expression shifted, something fierce flashing in her eyes. "Child, you're not an intrusion, and anyone who tells you different will answer to me." She paused at the door. "His Grace hasn't brought anyone to Thornmere in 4 years, not since the funeral. Whatever happened today, whatever brought you here, he doesn't do things lightly. Remember that." After she left, Elara sank onto the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel it. The terror, the shock, the impossible reality that someone had tried to kill her and failed only because a man she barely knew had been watching. Why had he been watching? The question circled her mind as servants brought steaming buckets of water, as she sank into the copper tub and scrubbed the cliff dust from her skin, as she dressed in borrowed clothes that fit better than anything she'd worn in years. A simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but the fabric was soft and whole and clean. Dr. Morrison arrived while she was still drying her hair. He was elderly, kind-eyed, and mercifully efficient. He examined her wrist, her arms, the bruises Maris's violence had left scattered across her body like accusations. "How long has this been going on?" he asked quietly. 15 years. His hand stilled. 15 years. She was careful, always somewhere that wouldn't show, always with an explanation ready. Elara's voice sounded hollow to her own ears. "I learned not to complain. And today? Today she decided I was more valuable dead than alive." Doctor. Morrison finished his examination in silence, then packed his bag with deliberate care. "Miss Vance, I'm going to document everything I've seen here. With your permission, I'll prepare a formal medical report. It may be needed." "For what?" "For whatever comes next." He met her eyes. "His Grace is not a man who forgives easily. An attempted murder is not something he'll allow to stand unanswered." After the doctor left, Elara was alone with her thoughts, and they were not kind companions. She paced the room, unable to settle, her mind churning through possibilities and consequences. Maris wouldn't accept this, wouldn't simply let Elara disappear into Rowan's protection. She'd fight back, twist the narrative, turn Elara's rescue into something sordid and scandalous. By tomorrow, society would be buzzing with rumors. The unstable Vance girl seducing the grief-stricken Duke, or perhaps fleeing into his arms in some dramatic fiction of her own making. No one would believe the truth. No one ever did. A knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Rowan stood in the doorway, changed from his outdoor clothes into dark trousers and a simple white shirt. Without his coat and formal bearing, he looked younger, more human. But the scar on his face and the shadows in his eyes reminded her that he'd seen his own share of darkness. "May I come in?" "It's your house." "It's your room." He waited until she nodded before entering, leaving the door carefully ajar, propriety observed even in crisis. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know what I'm feeling." Elara wrapped her arms around herself. "Grateful, terrified, confused, all of it at once." "That seems reasonable, given that someone tried to kill you a few hours ago." He moved to the window, looking out at the darkening moors. "Dr. Morrison showed me his report. Elara, what she did to you is in the past, is evidence." He turned to face her. "Evidence that can be used to ensure she never hurts you again." "You don't understand how this works." Elara's laugh was bitter. "Maris has spent 15 years building her reputation. She's beloved in society, charitable, gracious, the devoted widow who sacrificed so much to raise her troubled stepdaughter." She gestured to herself. "Look at me. Who do you think they'll believe?" "They'll believe what I tell them I witnessed. Will they? Or will they wonder why a reclusive duke was lurking on cliff paths, watching his neighbor's property, why he was so conveniently positioned to intervene?" She saw him flinch and pressed on. "Maris will spin this into something ugly. She'll say I threw myself off that cliff in a dramatic bid for your attention, or that you and I planned this together, or that I'm delusional and imagined the whole thing. You're not delusional. Prove it." The challenge hung between them. "You have your word against hers. A medical report that shows old injuries but no proof of who inflicted them. And you have me, a girl with no social standing, no witnesses, no credibility. Elara sank into a chair. She's already won. Rowan crossed the room and crouched in front of her, bringing his eyes level with hers. Up close, she could see the silver threading through the gray, could count the individual lines that pain and time had etched into his face. Listen to me carefully, he said. I don't care what society believes. I don't care about Maris Vance's reputation or her carefully constructed lies. I care about one thing, keeping you alive. Everything else is secondary. Why? The question burst from her. Why do you care? You don't know me. We've met twice. I'm nothing to you. You're a person who is being systematically destroyed by someone who should have protected you. That makes you everything that matters. His intensity pinned her in place. I failed someone once. Failed to see what was happening until it was too late. I won't make that mistake again. His wife. He was talking about his wife. What happened to her? Elara asked softly. Pain flashed across his face. She suffered in silence, hid her struggles because she thought she had to be strong, had to be perfect. By the time I realized how badly she was struggling, how close to breaking, he stopped, his jaw working. She died because I didn't pay attention, because I was too focused on duty, on running the estate, on being the Duke. I let her slip through my fingers. That's not the same as what's happening to me, isn't it? A woman in pain, isolated, convinced no one will believe her or help her? He stood abruptly. I see the pattern, Elara, and I refuse to watch it play out again. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something in her chest. This wasn't about heroism or duty. This was about guilt, about a man trying to save someone he hadn't been able to save before. I can't be your second chance, she whispered. You're not. You're a person who deserves to live without fear, that's all. He moved toward the door, then paused. Get some rest. Tomorrow we plan our next move. What next move? The one where we destroy Maris Vance before she can destroy you. After he left, Elara sat in the darkening room and tried to imagine a world where Maris faced consequences, where justice existed for girls like her, where the powerful didn't simply crush the weak beneath their heels and walk away smiling. She couldn't picture it, but Rowan seemed certain it was possible, and that terrified her almost as much as the fall had. That night, sleep came in fragments broken by nightmares. She kept falling, kept feeling the moment her feet left solid ground, kept seeing Maris's cold smile as she pushed. Except in the dreams, Rowan's hand never caught her. She plummeted forever, the rocks rushing up to meet her, waking in gasping panic just before impact. The fourth time she jerked awake, dawn was breaking. Pale light filtered through the curtains, painting the unfamiliar room in shades of gray and gold. Someone knocked softly. Mrs. Blackwood entered with a breakfast tray, took one look at Elara's face, and set it down with a knowing sigh. Bad dreams? I keep falling. You'll keep falling for a while yet. The housekeeper poured tea with steady hands. Trauma doesn't release its grip easily. But you're here. You're alive. That's what matters. Is it? Because I feel like I just traded one cage for another. Elara accepted the teacup, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. Rowan, his grace, he wants to fight Maris, but he doesn't understand what he's up against. Doesn't he? Mrs. Blackwood's smile was sharp. Child, His Grace spent 5 years fighting a war on the northern borders. He commanded armies, negotiated with warlords, held territory against impossible odds. If anyone understands what it means to fight a seemingly unbeatable enemy, it's him. This isn't the same as war, isn't it? The housekeeper's eyes were shrewd. War, politics, society, they all run on the same currency. Power, information, leverage. His Grace knows how to acquire all three. A different kind of unease stirred in Elara's stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that you're not his charity case. You're his cause. And when Rowan Hale commits to a cause, he doesn't stop until he's won or he's dead. Mrs. Blackwood headed for the door. Now eat. You'll need your strength for what comes next. What came next arrived an hour later in the form of a formal summons. A footman delivered the message on embossed paper. Lady Cordelia Ashworth and her daughter Vivian were calling to discuss the unfortunate incident involving dear Miss Vance. Elara's blood ran cold. They're here? In the drawing room with His Grace. The footman's face was carefully neutral. He requests your presence if you're feeling well enough. She wasn't. She would never be well enough to face the society matrons whose approval Maris had courted so carefully, but hiding in her room would only confirm every terrible thing Maris had already told them about her. She dressed in another of the late Duchess's gowns, a simple gray that made her look like she was in mourning, and went downstairs on legs that felt like lead. Voices drifted from the drawing room, Lady Ashworth's imperious tones cutting through the air like a knife. Cannot possibly mean to harbor her here, Your Grace. The scandal alone, the scandal, Rowan's voice was ice, is that a woman attempted to murder her stepdaughter. Everything else is trivia. Murder? My dear Duke, you must have misunderstood. Maris explained everything. The girl was distraught, standing too close to the edge. I witnessed it. Lady Vance deliberately pushed Miss Elara off the cliff. Witnessed it? Or misinterpreted a tragic accident? This was Vivian, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We all know how grief and isolation can affect one's perception. You've been alone here so long, Elara pushed open the door. He didn't misinterpret anything. Three faces turned toward her. Lady Ashworth looked like she'd bitten into something sour. Vivian's expression was pure calculation, but Rowan's eyes held something else. Approval, maybe, or respect. Miss Vance? Lady Ashworth's tone could have frozen fire. How unexpected to see you up and about. After such an ordeal, most young ladies would be prostrate with nerves. I'm not most young ladies. Clearly. Vivian's gaze raked over Elara's borrowed dress. Though one must wonder at the propriety of staying here, unchaperoned, in a bachelor's household. Mrs. Blackwood serves as chaperone, Rowan interjected smoothly. Along with a staff of 30, Miss Vance's reputation is quite secure. Is it? Lady Ashworth's smile was poisonous. Because the story circulating through society is rather different. They're saying you've been carrying on an affair with the Duke behind your poor stepmother's back. That today's drama was staged to force his hand into offering protection, or more. The accusation hung in the air like a guillotine blade. That's absurd, Elara said, but her voice shook. Is it? You appear at the Duke's door wearing his dead wife's clothes, claiming attempted murder with no witnesses besides him, demanding sanctuary from the only family you have left. Lady Ashworth stood, smoothing her skirts. My dear girl, it looks precisely like what it is, a desperate bid for status and security. Lady Ashworth, Rowan's voice could have cut glass, choose your next words very carefully. I'm simply stating what everyone is thinking. Maris Vance is beloved in society. You, Your Grace, are a recluse with a tragic past. And this girl, she gestured dismissively at Elara, is known to be unstable. Who should we believe? Believe the evidence. Dr. Morrison has documented years of abuse, evidence that could have come from anywhere. A clumsy girl with a tendency toward accidents. Lady Ashworth gathered her gloves. Your Grace, I came here as a friend to warn you. This association will destroy what remains of your reputation. Send the girl back to her stepmother. Let Maris handle her own household affairs. Send her back to be murdered? Murdered! Vivian laughed, the sound like breaking glass. You sound like something from a penny dreadful. Maris wouldn't hurt a fly. Everyone knows that. Everyone is wrong. Then prove it. Lady Ashworth's eyes glittered. Take your claims to the magistrate. File formal charges. Subject yourself to the investigation and scrutiny that will follow. She leaned forward. But we both know you won't. Because you can't prove anything. It's your word against hers. And in that fight, she wins. She swept toward the door, Vivian trailing behind. But at the threshold, she paused. One more thing, Your Grace. Maris asked me to deliver a message. She's willing to forgive this incident, to welcome her stepdaughter home with open arms, no questions asked. All you need to do is send the girl back, today, before this situation becomes irreversible. And if I refuse? Lady Ashworth's smile was cruel. Then Maris will be forced to take legal action, to prove in court that her stepdaughter is mentally incompetent and a danger to herself. She has doctors who will testify, witnesses to years of erratic behavior, and once that's established, Elara will be committed to an asylum for her own protection. The words landed like blows. An asylum. Elara had heard stories about those places. Women disappeared into them and never came out, condemned by fathers, husbands, brothers who wanted them silenced or simply out of the way. Once committed, there was no escape, no appeal, just slow death in a cell while the world forgot you existed. "She can't do that," Elara whispered. "She can't." "She can," Lady Ashworth said flatly. "And she will, unless you return home today. The choice is yours, Miss Vance. Go home and live quietly under your stepmother's generous care, or fight this and lose everything, including your freedom." They left in a rustle of expensive fabric and expensive perfume. Elara stood frozen, her mind reeling. Maris had thought of everything, every angle, every escape route, every possible move. If Elara stayed here, Maris would have her committed. If she went back, Maris would kill her. There was no winning. There never had been. "She's bluffing," Rowan said, but he didn't sound certain. "She's not." Elara sank into a chair. "She's been building this case for years. Every time she locked me in my room for nerves, every time she told people I was fragile, unstable, prone to hysterics, she was creating a paper trail. Evidence. Evidence can be challenged. By whom? I have no allies, no money, no standing in society." She looked at him. "You can't fight this. You're one man, and Maris has the entire social structure on her side." "Then we change the structure." "How?" Rowan paced, his mind clearly racing. "We need leverage, something that destroys her credibility before she can attack yours. We need—" A commotion erupted from the entrance hall, raised voices, the sound of scuffling. Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, her face tight with disapproval. "Your Grace, there's a situation." Behind her, flanked by 2 constables, stood Maris Vance. She looked perfect, devastated, fragile, brave, every inch the grieving stepmother. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. Her hands twisted a handkerchief with artful desperation. "Rowan," she said, her voice breaking beautifully on his name. "Thank heavens. I was so worried. When Elara ran away after her terrible accident, I feared the worst." "Ran away?" Elara stood. "You pushed me." "There, you see?" Maris turned to the constables. "She's confused, disoriented. The fall must have damaged her mind. Gentlemen, I'm here to bring my stepdaughter home where she can receive proper care." The older constable cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Miss Vance, your stepmother says you fled the estate in a state of distress. I fled because she tried to kill me. And that you've been experiencing delusions, mental instability." He pulled out a document. "She's brought documentation from 2 physicians certifying that you're a danger to yourself and require immediate intervention." Ice flooded Elara's veins. "Those are forgeries. She's lying. I'm trying to help you, darling." Maris's voice was honey and poison. "Ever since your father died, you've been declining. The grief, the isolation, it's broken your mind. But we can fix this. There's a lovely facility where you can rest, recover." "You mean an asylum?" Rowan stepped between Elara and the constables. "And you're not taking her anywhere." "Your Grace, with all respect, this is a family matter." The constable gestured to his companion. "Lady Vance has legal guardianship until Miss Vance reaches her majority. We're authorized to return her to her guardian's care." "On what grounds?" "On the grounds that she's mentally incompetent and a danger to herself." Maris produced another document. "This is an emergency commitment order signed by Judge Pemberton this morning. It authorizes her immediate transfer to Ashwood Asylum for evaluation." Ashwood. Elara had heard that name whispered in terrified tones. It was where wealthy families sent their inconvenient daughters, where women went in and never came out sane. "This is kidnapping," Rowan snarled. "Illegal detention. It's legal intervention for a mentally ill young woman." Maris's mask slipped for just a moment, showing the monster beneath. "And you, Your Grace, have no standing to interfere. She's not your wife, not your ward, not your anything. She's mine." The constables moved forward. Rowan blocked them, his hand going to his side where a sword would have hung during the war. If you touch her, he said quietly, I will end you. Your Grace, the older constable's voice was firm. Don't make this worse. We're acting on legal authority. Stand aside. Rowan, please. Elara's voice cut through the tension. She stepped around him, facing Maris directly. Don't! They'll arrest you, and then I'll have no one. His face was anguished. I can't let them take you. You don't have a choice. She turned to the constables, lifting her chin. I'll go, without a fight. Just give me a moment. Maris's smile was triumphant. Of course, darling. Take all the time you need. Elara moved close to Rowan, close enough that only he could hear her whisper. Don't give up. Find proof. I'll survive long enough for you to find it. Elara, promise me you'll fight. Promise me this isn't the end. His hands closed on her shoulders, gripped tight enough to bruise. I swear it. On my life, I swear I'll get you out. Then the constables were pulling her away, their grip professional but inescapable. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just walked with her head high as they escorted her to the waiting carriage. Maris followed, all solicitous concern for anyone watching, but as she climbed in beside Elara, her mask dropped completely. Did you really think you could escape me? She hissed. You stupid, stupid girl. I own you. I've always owned you. And now you're going somewhere no one will ever hear you scream. The carriage door slammed shut. Through the window, Elara caught one last glimpse of Rowan standing in the doorway of Thornmere Hall, his face a mask of fury and determination. Then the carriage pulled away, carrying her toward Ashwood Asylum and whatever fresh hell Maris had planned. The war had begun, and Elara had just lost the first battle. Ashwood Asylum crouched against the moorland like a diseased animal, all blackened stone and barred windows that reflected nothing but despair. The carriage wheels crunched over gravel as they approached, and Elara felt every rotation like a countdown to her own execution. You'll hate it at first, Maris said conversationally, examining her nails. The screaming keeps you awake. The smell makes you vomit, but eventually you'll break. They all break. And when you do, when you're nothing but a hollow shell who'll sign whatever I put in front of you, I'll consider letting you out. To sign over my inheritance, to sign over everything, your fortune, your rights, your very identity. Maris's smile was reptilian. And then, perhaps you'll have a tragic relapse. These things happen in asylums. No one questions it when the mad finally succumb. The carriage stopped. The door opened. Doctor. Cornelius Marsh stood waiting, a skeletal figure in a black coat that hung from his frame like a shroud. His face was all sharp angles and hollow spaces, his eyes the flat gray of a corpse. Lady Vance, I've prepared the special room as requested. Excellent. Maris stepped down gracefully. Dr. Marsh runs the finest facility in the north, very discreet, very effective. He understands that certain patients require specialized treatment. Elara was pulled from the carriage by orderlies whose grip promised violence if she resisted. She didn't. Not yet. Fighting now would only give them an excuse to restrain her, to drug her, to make her exactly what Maris claimed she was: hysterical, unstable, dangerous. The asylum's interior was worse than its exterior. Gaslight flickered against water-stained walls. The air reeked of carbolic acid and human waste and something else, something sweet and rotten that made Elara's stomach heave. From deeper in the building came sounds, moaning, crying, a woman's voice raised in endless, wordless shrieking. The East Wing, Dr. Marsh said, leading them down a corridor that seemed to narrow with every step. Where we house our most troubled cases. Maximum security, no visitors without written authorization from the Guardian. Perfect. Maris's heels clicked against stone. And the treatments? We'll begin immediately. Hydrotherapy, isolation, medication to calm the nerves. His smile revealed yellowed teeth. By the time we're finished, she'll be quite malleable. They stopped at a door reinforced with iron bands. Dr. Marsh produced a ring of keys, selected one, and unlocked 3 separate bolts. The cell beyond was barely 10 feet square. No window, no furniture except a narrow cot bolted to the floor, a bucket in the corner for waste. Scratches marked the walls, tallies of days, prayers to deaf ears, names of women who'd been forgotten here. No, Elara breathed. Please. The orderlies shoved her inside. She stumbled, catching herself against the wall. "Welcome to your new home, stepdaughter." Mara stood framed in the doorway, backlit like an avenging angel. "I'll visit once you've learned some manners, which should be, a few months from now, if you survive." The door slammed shut, bolts scraped into place, and Elara was alone in the dark. She didn't scream. Screaming was what they expected, what they wanted. Instead, she felt her way to the cot and sat, forcing her breathing to stay even, her mind to stay clear. Rowan had sworn to find proof, to fight. She just had to survive long enough for him to do it. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the absolute darkness. Elara's eyes adjusted enough to make out vague shapes, but there was nothing to see. Just walls and a door and the terrible knowledge that outside the world continued without her. Footsteps approached. The door opened, spilling gaslight into the cell. Dr. Marsh entered, flanked by 2 orderlies and a nurse carrying a tray of instruments that gleamed with malice. "Time for your first treatment, Miss Vance. This will help calm your delusions." "I'm not delusional. Resistance is a symptom." He nodded to the orderlies. "Hold her." They grabbed her arms, forcing her down onto the cot. The nurse approached with a leather strap. "Wait." Elara's composure cracked. "You can't do this. I haven't been evaluated. I haven't seen a judge. Your stepmother provided all necessary documentation. You were declared incompetent by legal authority." Dr. Marsh prepared a syringe, tapping it to remove air bubbles. "This is laudanum mixed with a few other compounds. It will make you more cooperative." The needle descended toward her arm, and Elara made a choice. She went limp, letting her body sag as if fainting. The orderly's grips loosened fractionally, just enough. She wrenched her right arm free and drove her elbow into the nearest one's throat. He staggered back, choking. She rolled off the cot, using the momentum to kick the second orderly's knee. Something crunched. He went down screaming. The nurse lunged at her. Elara grabbed the tray of instruments and swung it like a weapon. Metal scattered across stone. The nurse retreated. Dr. Marsh stood frozen, the syringe still in his hand. "You want to drug me?" Elara's voice was raw, feral. "You want to break me? Try it. But I'll fight every single time. I'll fight until you kill me or I kill you. Those are the only ways this ends." "Restrain her!" "Doctor!" Marsh shrieked. More orderlies poured into the cell. Too many. Elara fought anyway, a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. She landed blows that would bruise, scratched faces, drew blood. But there were too many hands, too much weight. They bore her down to the floor. Someone's knee pressed into her spine. Her arms were wrenched behind her back, strapped with leather that bit into skin. The needle punctured her arm. Fire spread through her veins, cold and burning simultaneously. The world began to blur, sounds becoming distorted, her thoughts scattering like leaves in wind. "Take her to the bath," Dr. Marsh ordered, breathing hard. "Ice water, 2 hours. That should teach her cooperation." They dragged her. She couldn't walk, couldn't feel her legs, down corridors that stretched into infinity, into a tiled room dominated by a porcelain tub filled with water so cold that vapor rose from its surface. They stripped her, ignoring her weak attempts to resist, and plunged her into the ice. The shock drove every thought from her mind except one: survive. The cold was agony. It seized her lungs, stopped her heart, turned her blood to sludge. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but endure as seconds became minutes, became an eternity of frozen hell. When they finally pulled her out, she was blue-lipped and shaking so violently her teeth cracked together. They threw a rough blanket around her and dragged her back to the cell, where she lay curled on the cot, unable to stop trembling. "Tomorrow we continue," Dr. Marsh said from the doorway. "And the day after, and the day after that, until you learn that resistance is futile." The door closed. The bolts slid home. And in the darkness, through chattering teeth and drugged haze, Elara whispered, "Rowan, please." But Rowan was miles away, and her voice carried nowhere at all. 3 days passed in a hell of treatments and torture disguised as medicine. Ice baths, restraints, drugs that made her thoughts fuzzy and her body unresponsive. Dr. Marsh visited daily, documenting her progress in a ledger that would serve as evidence of her incompetence. "You're doing very well," he told her on the morning of the 4th day. "Much calmer. Lady Vance will be pleased." Elara didn't respond. The drugs made speech difficult, made everything difficult. But beneath the pharmaceutical fog, her mind still worked. Slower, yes, but working. She'd learned the patterns. Treatments came in the morning and evening. Food, if the slop they served could be called that, arrived at midday. The orderlies changed shifts at 8-hour intervals. The night staff was smaller, lazier, more prone to drinking in the guardroom. Information. Mrs. Blackwood's voice echoed in her memory. Power, leverage. She was collecting information. She just needed to stay conscious long enough to use it. That afternoon, a commotion erupted somewhere in the asylum. Shouting, running feet, something that sounded like breaking glass. The orderly who brought her evening meal was distracted, nervous. Some madwoman trying to escape through the roof. Idiots! Elara filed that away. Someone had tried, which meant escape was possible. Later, after the drugs from her evening treatment began to wear off, she heard something else. Footsteps in the corridor. Not the heavy tread of orderlies, but something lighter, more cautious. The bolts on her door slid back. Elara tensed, expecting Dr. Marsh or another round of torture. Instead, a woman slipped inside, middle-aged, gray-haired, wearing the plain dress of a ward attendant. "Miss Vance?" she whispered. "Don't scream. I'm here to help." "Who are you?" "My name is Agnes. I work in the laundry, but I used to be a lady's maid for the Hale family." She produced a small vial from her pocket. "The Duke sent me. He's been searching for a way to get you out, but the asylum is locked down tight. This is all I could smuggle in. A purgative. It'll make you vomit up the drugs they're giving you. Won't stop the effects completely, but it'll help you stay clearer." Hope blazed in Elara's chest. "He knows I'm here?" "The whole territory knows. There's been an uproar. The Duke tried to file charges against Lady Vance, but she's got the magistrate in her pocket. He's working on getting a judge from the capital to review the commitment order, but that takes time." Agnes pressed the vial into Elara's hand. "Time you might not have. Lady Vance visited Dr. Marsh yesterday. They were talking about permanent solutions." Permanent solutions. Death, in other words. "How long do I have?" "Days. Maybe a week if you're lucky." Agnes glanced at the door. "The Duke says to hold on. He's coming for you, but you have to survive until he does." "How?" "Any way you can." She moved toward the door. "I have to go. Hide that vial. Don't take it all at once, just enough to keep your mind clear. And Miss Vance, fight. Don't let them break you." She slipped out, leaving Elara alone with a tiny vial of hope and the knowledge that Maris was planning her murder. Elara used the purgative sparingly, just enough to counter the worst effects of the laudanum. Her mind sharpened, her body regained some coordination, but she hid it, playing the part of the broken, compliant patient. Let them think their treatments were working. On the 6th day, Maris visited. She swept into the cell like a queen surveying a conquered territory, her silk skirts rustling against filthy stone. "My dear Elara, how thin you've become. How diminished." She circled the cot where Elara sat, cataloging damage with satisfaction. "Dr. Marsh tells me you're responding well to treatment, that you've stopped fighting. Is that true?" Elara kept her eyes downcast, her voice slurred. "Yes, Mother." "Good, because I have papers for you to sign. A declaration that you're voluntarily surrendering your inheritance to my care, acknowledging your incompetence to manage your own affairs." "I'll sign." Maris paused, suspicion flickering across her face. "Just like that?" "You've won. I understand that now." Elara lifted her eyes, making sure they looked glazed, defeated. "I just want this to stop." "How convenient." Maris produced a document from her bag along with a pen. "Sign here and here. An initial here." Elara took the pen with shaking fingers. She scrawled something approximating her signature on the first line, then the second. When she reached the third, she drove the pen into Maris's hand. Her stepmother screamed, jerking back. Blood welled from the puncture wound. "You little bitch! You want my signature?" Elara was on her feet, the drugs and weakness burning away in a rush of pure fury. "You'll have to kill me first, and then what? A dead heiress is no good to you. The fortune goes to distant relatives. You get nothing." Maris clutched her bleeding hand, her face twisted with rage. You think this changes anything? You're still trapped here, still at my mercy. Am I? Because I think you're running out of time. Rowan is coming. He's finding proof. And when he does, when everyone knows what you've done, no one will believe a mad woman's ravings. But Maris's voice shook. I'll have Dr. Marsh increase your treatments. Break you properly this time. Then do it. But know that every day I survive is another day closer to your destruction. Elara smiled, and it was her stepmother's own cruel smile reflected back. I'm not giving up. I'm not signing. And I'm not dying quietly to make your life easier. Maris's hand lashed out, the slap rocking Elara's head back. We'll see how brave you are after another week here, after they've bled you, drugged you, subjected you to every treatment in their arsenal. We'll see what's left of your defiance then. She stormed out, shouting for Dr. Marsh. Elara sank back onto the cot, adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. She'd bought time. Maris couldn't kill her while the inheritance was still in legal limbo, but she'd also made things infinitely worse. The treatments that followed were vindictive. Longer ice baths, higher doses of laudanum, hours strapped to a chair in a dark room, denied food and water, until hallucinations crept in at the edges of her vision. Agnes smuggled in more purgative, but it wasn't enough. Elara could feel herself fraying, her mind starting to splinter under the relentless assault. On the 9th day, she broke a different way. Dr. Marsh entered her cell with his instruments, ready for another session. Elara didn't fight. She smiled. You're right, she said dreamily. The treatments are helping. I can feel myself getting better. He paused. Can you? Oh, yes. I understand now that Maris was only trying to protect me. That I was sick, confused. But I'm clear now, so clear. She tilted her head. Would you like to know what I see? What do you see, Miss Vance? I see your death. The smile never left her face, but her eyes were utterly sane, utterly focused. Dr. Marsh backed toward the door. She's becoming delusional. Increase the dosage. I'm not delusional. I'm making a prediction. Elara stood slowly. Rowan Hale is going to destroy you. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But he's coming. And when he finds out what you've done here, to me and to all the other women you've tortured for profit, he's going to end you. The Duke has no authority here. He has money, power, connections, and most importantly, he has rage. She moved closer. Do you know what men like him are capable of when someone they've sworn to protect is harmed? They burn worlds. Dr. Marsh fled, bolting the door behind him, but the seed was planted. Elara had seen it in his eyes, fear, real, genuine fear, because he knew she was right. That night, Elara lay awake, counting her heartbeats, measuring time by the distant sounds of the asylum settling around her. Somewhere a woman wept. Somewhere else, another screamed, the chorus of the damned. She wouldn't join it, wouldn't let this place consume her. Footsteps approached her cell, multiple sets, moving with purpose. The door crashed open. Not Dr. Marsh this time. Not orderlies. Maris stood flanked by 3 men Elara didn't recognize. Rough types. The kind who did dirty work for money and didn't ask questions. I'm done waiting, Maris said flatly. I'm done playing games with commitments and legal paperwork. Tonight, you're going to have an accident, a tragic suicide. You'll be found hanging in your cell, another victim of mental illness too severe to treat. One of the men produced a rope. Elara backed against the wall, her heart hammering. People will question. Let them question. Dr. Marsh will testify that you were despondent, violent, a danger to yourself. The Duke can rage all he wants. A dead woman can't contradict the official story. Maris nodded to her hired thugs. Make it look convincing, but make it permanent. They advanced. Elara grabbed the bucket from the corner and swung it. The metal rim caught one man across the face. He went down cursing, blood streaming from his nose. The second man lunged. She ducked under his arms, drove her knee into his groin, used his momentum to slam him into the wall. But the third caught her from behind, arms locking around her throat in a chokehold. She clawed at his hands, gasping, black spots blooming across her vision. This was it. This was how it ended. Not with a trial or justice or vindication, but with murder disguised as suicide in a cell no one would investigate. The darkness was closing in when she heard it, a sound like distant thunder. Hoofbeats. The man choking her hesitated. Shouting erupted from the asylum entrance. Crashes, screams, the unmistakable ring of steel on steel. What the hell? Maris ran to the cell door. An explosion rocked the building. Glass shattered. Someone was bellowing orders in a voice that carried the weight of absolute command. Rowan. He'd come. The chokehold released as the thug panicked, bolting for the door. His companions followed, abandoning Maris and their mission in favor of escape. Maris turned back to Elara, her face a mask of fury and desperation. This isn't over. It will never be over. The cell door flew open with such force it slammed into the wall. Rowan Hale filled the doorway, sword in hand, blood splattered across his coat. Behind him, armed men spread through the corridor, securing the area. His eyes found Elara, thin, bruised, barely standing, and something murderous flickered across his face. Then they landed on Maris. Run, he said softly. Maris went pale. Your Grace, I can explain. Run. His voice never rose, but it promised violence in every syllable. Because if you're still in my sight when I count to 3, I'm going to forget you're a woman and treat you like the monster you are. 1. Maris ran. Rowan started after her, but Elara's voice stopped him. Let her go. He turned, concern replacing rage. Elara. Let her go. She straightened despite the pain, despite everything. Killing her makes her a victim. I want her destroyed, not martyred. He stared at her for a long moment, then slowly sheathed his sword. As you wish. He moved to her side, and his hands were impossibly gentle as he examined her injuries. Can you walk? I can run if I have to. You won't have to, not anymore. He swept her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. I've got you. As they exited the cell, Elara saw the destruction Rowan had wrought. Doors hung from broken hinges. Orderlies lay groaning on the floor. Dr. Marsh cowered in a corner, begging for mercy he wouldn't receive. I brought the magistrate from the capital, Rowan said, as he carried her through the carnage, along with witnesses, documents, and enough evidence to bury both Maris and this hellhole. By morning, every newspaper in the territory will carry the story of what happened here. She'll fight back. Let her try. His arms tightened protectively. I'm done playing by society's rules. She wanted war, she's got it. They emerged into the night air, clean and cold and free. A carriage waited, flanked by mounted guards. In the distance, more lanterns approached. Officials, journalists, witnesses drawn by the commotion. Maris's carefully constructed world was about to collapse. But as Rowan settled Elara in the carriage, wrapping her in blankets and calling for his physician, she caught a glimpse of movement in the asylum's upper windows, a figure watching them. Even at this distance, Elara could feel Maris's hatred like a physical force. It's not over, she murmured. No, Rowan agreed, climbing in beside her. But the next battle, we fight together. And we fight to win. The carriage rolled forward, carrying them away from Ashwood's horrors and toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the asylum burned. Rowan's men had set fires to destroy evidence, to ensure this place could never harm anyone again. The flames painted the night sky orange and gold, a funeral pyre for the institution that had tried to break her. Elara watched it burn and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Maris had tried to erase her, to silence her, to bury her in madness and obscurity. Instead, she'd created something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. A woman who'd survived the fall, survived the asylum, survived every cruelty designed to destroy her. A woman who was done surviving and ready to fight. Take me to the cliffs, Elara said suddenly. Rowan looked at her sharply. What? The cliffs where she pushed me. I want to go there. Now. Tonight. Elara, you need rest. Medical attention. I need to face her. One final time. No more intermediaries. No more running. Just her and me and the truth. She met his eyes. Will you help me? Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. What are you planning? To finish this. Elara's smile was sharp as broken glass. She wants to destroy me? Let her try. But this time, I'll be ready. This time, I choose the battlefield. Rowan studied her for a long moment, then called to the driver. Change of route, the Vance estate, the cliff path. Your Grace, do it. The carriage turned, heading toward the coast, toward the cliffs, toward the confrontation that would end this one way or another. Because Elara had realized something during her days in hell. Maris's greatest weapon had always been Elara's fear, her silence, her willingness to endure rather than fight back. But that girl was dead. The one who'd survived Ashwood was someone new, someone forged in ice baths and laudanum dreams, and the absolute certainty that death was better than surrender. Someone who would stand on that cliff edge again. And this time, when the confrontation came, it wouldn't be Elara who fell. The carriage thundered through the night, wheels churning up gravel and mud as they raced toward the coast. Elara sat wrapped in blankets that couldn't touch the cold inside her, watching the landscape blur past in darkness punctuated by moonlight. Rowan hadn't spoken since she'd demanded this detour. He sat across from her, tension radiating from every line of his body, one hand resting on his sword hilt as if expecting ambush at any moment. "You think I'm crazy," Elara said finally. "I think you're traumatized and should be in bed under a doctor's care, not racing toward another confrontation with the woman who tried to kill you twice." His eyes glinted in the dim interior light. "But I also think you know something I don't. So tell me, what's the plan?" Maris has spent 15 years controlling the narrative, making herself the victim, the devoted stepmother, the respectable widow, making me the problem. Elara's hands clenched in the blanket. Every accusation I made, she countered with documentation. Every truth I spoke, she buried under lies and social proof. She won because she controlled what people believed. And going to the cliffs changes that how. Because she'll come. She can't help herself. Elara leaned forward. "You destroyed Ashwood tonight. By morning, questions will be asked, investigations launched. Her perfect facade is cracking, and when things crack, Maris doesn't retreat. She attacks. She'll come to that cliff to finish what she started, to eliminate the one witness who can destroy her completely. You're using yourself as bait. I'm creating an opportunity for truth." Elara's smile was bitter. "You said you brought witnesses from the capital. Journalists, officials. What if they witness her attempting murder with their own eyes? What if the respectable widow reveals the monster beneath in front of people she can't manipulate or threaten?" Rowan's expression shifted from concern to something darker. Understanding. "You want her to try again. I want her to show everyone what she really is. No more he said, she said, no more legal maneuvering, just Maris Vance revealed in all her murderous glory with witnesses who can't be silenced." Elara met his gaze steadily. "I survived the fall once because you caught me. This time, I need you to let me fall just far enough that everyone sees her push, then catch me. Can you do that?" The silence stretched between them, broken only by the rhythm of hoofbeats and the creak of carriage springs. "That's the most dangerous thing I've ever heard," Rowan said finally. "And I commanded suicide missions during the war. Is that a no?" "It's a demand for details. How do you know she'll come? How do we position witnesses without her noticing? What if I can't catch you in time? What if I spend the rest of my life hiding from her?" Elara cut in. "What if she eventually wins through attrition, through slowly destroying my credibility until no one believes anything I say? What if I survive only to live in fear forever?" She shook her head. "No. This ends tonight, one way or another." Rowan studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward and knocked on the carriage roof. When it slowed, he called out orders to the driver and the mounted guards accompanying them. "We're going to need the magistrate and at least 3 witnesses positioned where they can see clearly but won't be immediately visible. Lanterns extinguished until the signal. And someone needs to ride ahead. There's a gamekeeper's cottage with a clear view of the cliff path. We'll use it as an observation post." "You're helping me. I'm keeping you alive while you do something monumentally stupid." His voice was rough. "But Elara, if this goes wrong, it won't. If it does, if I can't reach you in time, I need you to know." He stopped, jaw working. "My wife died because I didn't see her suffering, didn't understand how desperate she'd become. I won't make that mistake again. I see you. Every day since that first afternoon when you served tea with burned hands and terror in your eyes, I've seen you. And I refuse to lose someone else. He cut himself off, but the unfinished sentence hung between them like a promise. Someone else I care about. Someone else I could love. Elara's breath caught. Rowan, after. His voice was firm. After we finish this, after you're safe, we'll have that conversation, but not before. I won't distract you when you need every bit of focus to survive. The carriage crested a hill, and the sea appeared below them, vast and dark and restless. The Vance estate sprawled along the cliffside, lights blazing in every window despite the late hour. Maris was home. And judging by the activity visible even at this distance, she was not alone. She's gathering her allies, Elara murmured, calling in favors, preparing her counterattack. Then we'd better move fast. Rowan called out more orders as the carriage descended toward the coast. Send riders to the magistrate's lodgings and the inn where the journalists are staying. Tell them the Duke of Thornmere requests their immediate presence on urgent legal business. Don't mention Miss Vance or the nature of the situation. Just get them to the gamekeeper's cottage within the hour. And Lady Vance, one of the guards called back, send her a message. Rowan's smile was predatory. Tell her Miss Elara Vance is at the cliffs where she attempted murder, and she's threatening to throw herself off unless her stepmother comes to talk her down. Appeal to her maternal concern. Make it sound like one final chance to control the situation quietly before it becomes a public scandal. Elara stared at him. That's brilliant. That's cruel. We're using her own tactics against her, making her think she's the one in control, that she's rushing to prevent disaster when really she's walking into a trap. He looked grim. I learned a lot about deception during the war. None of it pleasant. The carriage stopped at a small cottage set back from the main estate. The gamekeeper emerged, alarmed by the sudden arrival of armed men and a ducal carriage. Your Grace, what's happening? Crown business, Rowan said crisply, producing a document that bore official seals. I'm commandeering your cottage for the next few hours. You'll be compensated, generously, but I need you to go to the main house and stay there until dawn. Tell no one what you've seen here. The man took one look at the seal, at the armed guards, at Rowan's face, and fled without argument. Inside the cottage, Rowan positioned himself at the window that overlooked the cliff path. From here, he had a clear view of the edge where Maris had pushed Elara 9 days ago. 9 days that felt like 9 years. The witnesses will position themselves in the rocks below this vantage point, he said, gesturing, hidden from anyone on the path but with a direct line of sight. When Maris arrives, when she makes her move, they'll see everything. And you? I'll be in the shadows at the base of the cliff path, close enough to reach you in seconds. His expression was taut. But Elara, you have to give me a clear signal, some way to know when to move. Because if I intervene too early, she'll claim she was trying to save you, too late, and I'll scream your name, Elara said. The moment she pushes me, I'll scream it. That's your signal. Hoofbeats announced new arrivals. The magistrate from the capital, Lord Edmund Westbrook, a severe man in his 60s with a reputation for incorruptibility, dismounted along with 2 journalists whose eager expressions said they smelled a story. Rowan met them at the door, his explanations low and urgent. Elara watched their faces cycle through disbelief, shock, and grim determination as he outlined what was about to happen. This is highly irregular, Lord Westbrook said. Using a victim as bait. The victim volunteered, Elara interjected. And irregular is the only way to catch someone who spent 15 years gaming the system. Will you witness what happens here tonight? Will you testify to what you see with your own eyes? The magistrate studied her, this thin, bruised girl who looked like she'd been through hell and come out forged in fire. I will, he said finally. But young lady, if you have any doubt about this plan, my only doubt is whether Maris will fall for the bait. Elara moved toward the door. So let's find out. The walk to the cliff edge felt like walking to her own execution. Each step brought her closer to the place where she'd nearly died, where terror still lived in her bones like marrow. The wind howled in from the sea, carrying salt spray and the crash of waves against rocks. The same wind that had whipped around her as she fell, the same relentless force that cared nothing for human drama or survival. Elara positioned herself at the edge, exactly where she'd stood before. Close enough to make Maris feel confident, close enough to make the trap seem effortless. Behind her, hidden in shadow and stone, witnesses watched. Rowan was down there somewhere, ready to move, ready to catch her. She just had to trust. Trust in a man she barely knew. Trust that justice could exist in a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty. Trust that she could fall and be saved. It felt impossible. She stood there anyway. 20 minutes passed. 30. The cold seeped into her bones despite the cloak someone had draped over her shoulders. Doubt crept in. What if Maris didn't come? What if she saw through the trap? What if... Footsteps crunched on gravel. Elara's heart hammered as a figure emerged from the path. Not Maris, but a maid from the estate, breathless and frightened. Miss Elara? Your stepmother sent me to fetch you. She says it's dangerous out here, that you should come inside. Tell her if she wants to talk, she can come herself. Elara didn't turn around, didn't take her eyes off the churning sea below. Tell her this is her last chance to control the narrative. After tonight, everything becomes public. The maid fled. More waiting. The wind picked up, howling around Elara like something alive and hungry. Her fingers were numb. Her legs trembled from weakness and cold and the drug still in her system. Then finally, the footsteps she'd been waiting for. Maris appeared on this path, wrapped in a dark cloak that made her look like an avenging spirit. Her hair whipped around her face, and even at a distance, Elara could see the fury in her eyes. You foolish, foolish girl. Maris's voice cut through the wind. Did you really think this would work? Did you think I'd simply walk into whatever amateur trap you and your precious duke cooked up? Elara turned slowly, keeping the cliff edge at her back. You came, didn't you? I came to end this. Once and for all. Maris moved closer, her footsteps deliberate. The asylum was supposed to break you quietly, make you disappear without fuss, but you couldn't even manage that. You had to make a spectacle. Bring witnesses, force my hand. Your hand was forced the moment you tried to kill me the first time. That wasn't personal, it was practical. Maris's smile was cold. You were an obstacle, a complication. I removed complications, that's what survivors do. Survivors don't murder innocent people. Innocent? Maris laughed, the sound harsh against the wind. You were never innocent, you were born an obstacle. Your very existence stood between me and the life I deserved. The life I'd earned through 15 years of playing devoted stepmother to a thankless brat. You could have left, could have walked away after my father died. And give up the fortune? The estate? Everything I'd worked for? Maris shook her head. No. I'd invested too much, endured too much of your father's maudlin grief, your pathetic neediness. I'd earned this wealth with years of my life. I wasn't going to let some spoiled child take it from me simply because of an accident of birth. Her mask was slipping, the respectable widow dissolving to reveal the predator beneath. Elara pressed harder. So you decided to take everything from me instead. My childhood, my dignity, my very life. I decided to survive, something you've proven surprisingly good at, unfortunately. Maris took another step closer. But your survival ends tonight. You think you're clever bringing the Duke here? Having witnesses hidden somewhere in the dark? It doesn't matter, because when they find you broken on those rocks below, when I tell them how you jumped despite my desperate attempts to save you, they'll believe me. They always believe me. Will they? Elara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. Even with witnesses who saw you push me? What witnesses? The shadows? The rocks? Maris's confidence never wavered. No one will admit to hiding in the dark watching a suicide attempt without trying to prevent it. They'd be complicit. And your Duke? He's already biased. His testimony means nothing. Then why are you here? Elara challenged. If you're so certain you'll win, why risk another confrontation? Why not let me threaten suicide until I tire myself out? Something flickered across Maris's face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or calculation. Because loose ends bother me, and you, stepdaughter, are the loosest end of all. She lunged. Elara had been expecting it, had braced for it, but Maris moved with surprising speed. Hands grabbed her shoulders, fingers digging in with bruising force. This is where it ends, Maris hissed, shoving hard. This is where you finally do something useful and disappear. Elara's feet left the ground. The world became weightless chaos, wind and darkness, and the terrible certainty of falling. She screamed Rowan's name. Everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Strong hands caught her wrist, her arm, hauling her up with controlled strength that spoke of military training and absolute determination. Rowan pulled her against the cliff face, his body shielding hers, his arms iron bands of safety. Above them, Maris stood frozen at the edge, her face a mask of shock as lanterns blazed to life around the cliff path. Lord Westbrook emerged from concealment, followed by the journalists and half a dozen guards. More lanterns lit, revealing witnesses positioned in the rocks, on the path, in every vantage point with a clear view. They'd all seen. Every single one had witnessed Maris Vance deliberately pushing her stepdaughter off a cliff. "Lady Vance!" Lord Westbrook's voice was cold as winter steel. "You are under arrest for attempted murder. Guards, restrain her." Maris backed away from the approaching guards, her eyes wild. No, you don't understand. She jumped. I was trying to save her." "We saw you push her," one of the journalists called out, scribbling frantically in his notebook. "Multiple witnesses from multiple angles. There's no talking your way out of this one, Lady Vance. This is a conspiracy. The Duke put you up to this. He's obsessed with her. He's been stalking my family." "I have documentation," Rowan said, climbing up from the cliff face with Elara held securely against his side. "Medical reports from Dr. Morrison detailing 15 years of systematic abuse. Testimony from servants. Financial records showing how you've been embezzling from Miss Vance's trust. And now, witnesses to attempted murder." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "Your conspiracy theory doesn't hold up against evidence, Lady Vance." A guard reached for Maris's arm. She wrenched away, stumbling backward. Too far backward. Her foot slipped on the cliff edge, the same edge where she'd pushed Elara twice, and suddenly she was the one falling, arms windmilling, a scream tearing from her throat. Rowan moved on instinct, diving forward, his hand shooting out to catch her wrist just as he'd caught Elara. For a moment, Maris hung suspended over the void, her life literally in his hands. Their eyes met. "Please," she gasped, "don't let me fall, please." And Elara saw the calculation even in her terror, saw Maris already spinning this into another story, another manipulation. The noble Duke who saved even the woman who'd tried to kill his ward, the redemption narrative that would muddy the waters, create sympathy, cast doubt. Rowan saw it too. His jaw clenched, muscles straining with the effort of holding her weight. "Rowan, pull her up," Elara said quietly. He looked at her sharply. "Pull her up," Elara repeated. "Don't let her fall. Don't give her martyrdom. She faces justice, not death." For a long moment, nothing moved except the wind. Then Rowan hauled Maris up with a grunt of effort, depositing her back on solid ground where guards immediately seized her. "Take her," Lord Westbrook ordered, "and someone fetch chains. I'm not taking chances with this one." As guards dragged a screaming, protesting Maris away, the journalists swarmed, shouting questions, demanding statements. But Elara heard none of it. The world had narrowed to Rowan's arms around her and the solid ground beneath her feet. "It's over," she whispered. "Not quite." He guided her away from the chaos, back toward the cottage where warm light and safety waited. "There'll be a trial, testimony, scandal. This is going to consume the social circles for months." "Let it." Elara's voice was stronger now. "Let them talk. Let them print every sordid detail. The truth is uglier than any fiction they could invent." Inside the cottage, Mrs. Blackwood waited with hot tea and blankets, and the kind of fierce, protective energy that made Elara's throat tight with unexpected emotion. "Foolish, brave girl," the housekeeper muttered, wrapping her in warmth. "Using yourself as bait. You could have died." "I did die," Elara said softly. "The girl I was before, the one who stayed silent, who endured, who believed survival was enough, she died in that asylum. This is who came back." "And who is that?" Rowan asked. Elara met his eyes. "Someone who refuses to be a victim anymore. Someone who fights." Over the next 3 days, the story exploded across the Northern Territories like wildfire. The newspapers printed everything. Maris's arrest, the Ashwood asylum scandal, testimony from servants who finally felt safe enough to speak. Dr. Marsh was arrested along with several orderlies. The asylum was permanently closed, its records seized as evidence. And slowly, inexorably, the truth emerged. Not just about Maris Vance, but about the systems that had enabled her. The magistrates who'd rubber-stamped commitment orders without investigation. The doctors who'd diagnosed mental illness based on husbands' and fathers' testimony rather than actual examination. The asylums that operated as dumping grounds for inconvenient women. The scandal grew beyond one woman's crimes into something larger, something that forced society to look at itself and flinch. Elara found herself at the center of it, her story retold in a dozen different newspapers, each version more dramatic than the last. Some painted her as a helpless victim, others as a cunning strategist. A few got close to the truth that she was simply a survivor who'd refused to stay silent. "They're calling you the Cliff's Edge Angel," Rowan said, bringing her the morning papers as she sat in Thornmere's library, finally strong enough to be out of bed for extended periods. The woman who faced death twice and lived to seek justice. "That's absurd. That's publicity." He set the papers down. "And it's working in your favor. Public opinion has turned entirely against Maris. Several other families have come forward claiming similar abuses. You've started something, Elara, a reckoning." She traced her fingers over the newsprint, reading accounts of her own life written by strangers. It felt surreal, seeing her private horror transformed into public discourse. What about the trial? "Next month. Lord Westbrook is personally overseeing it. He's brought in judges from the capital to ensure impartiality." Rowan's expression was grim. "Maris's lawyers are mounting a defense, but it's weak. Too many witnesses. Too much evidence. She'll be convicted. And then? Prison. Maybe transportation to the penal colonies, depending on the sentence." He paused. "She won't hurt anyone again, Elara. I promise you that." That night, Elara stood at Thornmere's windows, looking out at the moors that stretched toward distant cliffs. The same cliffs where everything had begun, where Maris had pushed her, where she'd fallen and been caught, where she'd finally taken control of her own story. She heard Rowan enter behind her but didn't turn. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I keep waiting for it to feel real, for the fear to fade, for some sense of closure." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But it's still there. The knowledge that for 15 years no one saw, no one helped, no one believed it could be as bad as it was. I saw." His voice was rough. "I should have acted sooner. Should have. You saved my life. Twice." She finally turned to face him. "You saw when no one else would. That's not nothing, Rowan. That's everything." He crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth. "After the trial, after the dust settles, you'll have your inheritance, your freedom. You can go anywhere, do anything. The world is open to you now." "Is this your way of telling me to leave?" "This is my way of saying you have choices. Real ones, for the first time in your life." His eyes searched hers. "I don't want you to stay here out of gratitude or obligation. I want—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay because you choose to. Because Thornmere feels like home, because I—" He broke off again, the unfinished sentence hanging between them like it had in the carriage. Elara reached out, her fingers finding his. "Say it." "Because I'm falling in love with you." The words came out rushed, almost angry. "I know it's too soon. I know you need time to heal, to discover who you are outside of survival. I'm not asking for anything." "What if I'm asking?" She stepped closer. "What if I've been falling too, between the moments of terror and fighting? What if the future I want includes you?" His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. "Then we build it, together. No more victims, no more shadows, just two people choosing each other every single day." When he kissed her, it was soft and careful and full of promise. Not a claim of ownership, but an offer of partnership. A beginning, not an ending. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. But for the first time in 15 years, Elara wasn't afraid of storms. She'd survived worse. And she'd do more than survive the future. She'd claim it. The trial of Maris Vance began on a cold morning in late autumn. The courthouse in the territorial capital was packed with spectators, nobles in their finery, journalists with their notebooks, common folk who'd paid good money for standing room. Elara sat in the front row, flanked by Rowan on one side and Mrs. Blackwood on the other. She wore a simple blue dress, Not the rags Maris had forced on her, not borrowed clothes, but something new. Something chosen. When Maris was led in wearing chains, their eyes met across the courtroom. Maris looked smaller somehow, diminished. Without her fine clothes and social armor, she was just a woman facing consequences for the first time in her life. The trial lasted 3 days. Witness after witness took the stand. Servants who detailed years of abuse, Dr. Morrison with his medical documentation, Agnes from the asylum describing the horror she'd witnessed, the journalists who'd seen Maris push Elara off the cliff. Maris's defense tried everything, claimed Elara had jumped, suggested a conspiracy, painted Maris as a devoted mother driven to desperation by an unstable child. But the evidence was overwhelming. On the 3rd day, Lord Westbrook called Elara to testify. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, her hands steady. She'd prepared for this, rehearsed it with Rowan and the prosecution. But as she sat down and looked out at the packed courtroom, all those careful plans evaporated. She simply told the truth, 15 years of it, unflinching and raw. The hunger, the cold, the systematic destruction of her spirit, the ice baths at Ashwood, the drugs. The moment Maris's hands connected with her shoulders and pushed. By the time she finished, half the courtroom was in tears. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. They returned with a verdict of guilty on all counts: attempted murder, abuse, embezzlement, conspiracy to illegally commit. Maris was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole. As guards led her away, she turned one final time to look at Elara. "You've won," she said flatly. "Congratulations. You've destroyed me." "No," Elara replied. "You destroyed yourself. I just refuse to let you destroy me too." It was the last time they would ever speak. A week after the trial, Elara stood once more at the cliff's edge, but this time Rowan stood beside her, his hand warm in hers, and the drop below held no terror. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The confrontation? Using yourself as bait?" "Every day," she admitted. "And not at all. It was necessary. And it worked. You could have died. I could have died in a dozen different ways over the past 15 years, but I didn't. And now I'm free to live." She turned to him. "Really live. Not just survive." He pulled her close, and they stood there as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Behind them, Thornmere Hall rose against the darkening sky, no longer a stranger's fortress, but home. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an unwritten story. And for the first time in her entire life, Elara couldn't wait to see what came next. The future arrived not with fanfare, but with paperwork. 3 weeks after the trial, Elara sat in the study of Thornmere Hall, the same room where Rowan conducted his estate business, and signed document after document that transferred her father's fortune from legal limbo into her own hands. Her 25th birthday was still 2 years away, but Lord Westbrook had petitioned the court for early emancipation given the circumstances. The judge had taken one look at the trial transcripts and granted it immediately. "This one transfers ownership of the Vance estate," the solicitor said, sliding another paper across the desk. "And this establishes your independent trust account. And this dissolves any remaining legal connection to Maris Vance," Elara finished, reading the heading. Her hand hovered over the signature line. "She'll have no claim to anything. Not the estate, not the fortune, not even the Vance name." "Correct. You'll be legally and financially independent." The solicitor's expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the question in his eyes. "What will you do with it all?" Elara signed with steady strokes, then set down the pen. "I want to establish a foundation." Rowan, who'd been standing by the window giving her privacy for the legal proceedings, turned sharply. "A foundation? For women escaping abusive situations, women who need protection, legal assistance, a place to recover." She gestured to the stack of signed documents. "I have money now, resources, and I have a story that people listen to. I want to use all of it to help others who are still trapped the way I was." The solicitor's professional mask cracked into genuine surprise. "Miss Vance, that's quite ambitious. The legal structure alone will be complicated, I know, but necessary." Elara stood, moving to look out at the moors. During the trial, dozens of women wrote to me, servants, daughters, wives, all of them with stories like mine, some worse. They thanked me for speaking up, for giving them courage. But courage isn't enough when you're starving or locked in a room or committed to an asylum. They need practical help. You want to build a refuge, Rowan said softly. I want to build a system. Refuges, yes, but also legal aid, medical care, education and training so women can support themselves independently. She turned to face him. I survived because you intervened, but most women don't have a duke watching from the shadows. They need something else, something sustainable. The solicitor cleared his throat. With your fortune, Miss Vance, you could fund something quite substantial, but it would require careful planning, trustees, legal frameworks to protect the assets from challenge. Then let's start planning. Elara's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I want the first refuge operational within 6 months, here in the Northern Territories, close enough that I can oversee it personally. Over the following weeks, Thornmere transformed into something between a fortress and a planning headquarters. Architects came to design the refuge building. Lawyers drafted charter documents. Physicians and nurses were interviewed for staff positions. Mrs. Blackwood threw herself into organizing supply chains and protocols with military efficiency. And Elara discovered that running a charitable foundation was remarkably similar to surviving an abusive household. It required strategy, vigilance, and the ability to read people's true intentions beneath polite facades. The Ashworth family wants to donate, Rowan said one evening, bringing her a letter sealed with their family crest. A substantial amount, actually, along with a very public apology for their support of Maris. Elara read the letter, her expression skeptical. They want their reputation back. This is damage control. Probably. Does it matter if the money helps women who need it? She considered that. No, but I'm not giving them a seat on the board or any decision-making power. This foundation doesn't exist to rehabilitate noble reputations. It exists to save lives. Rowan's smile was proud. You're terrifying when you're pragmatic. I love it. The word love had become easier between them over the past month, not demanded or desperate, but offered freely and received the same way. They moved around each other like dancers learning new choreography, tentative at times, but increasingly certain. There's something else, Rowan said, his tone shifting to something more serious. A delegation from the capital is arriving tomorrow. Royal representatives. Elara's stomach clenched. Why? Because your trial became a national scandal. Because questions are being raised about asylum practices, about women's legal rights, about the systems that let Maris operate unchecked for 15 years. He moved closer. The Crown is investigating. They want to speak with you directly. To silence me? To listen. Or so they claim. His expression was guarded. I'll be with you the entire time, and if they try anything, then we'll handle it. Elara squared her shoulders. I'm not afraid of royal delegations, not after surviving Maris. But when the delegation arrived the next morning, 3 stern officials in elaborate court dress, accompanied by enough guards to stage a small invasion, Elara felt the old familiar terror creeping back. These were people with real power, people who could undo everything she'd built with a single decree. They gathered in Thornmere's formal receiving room, a space Rowan rarely used but maintained for exactly this kind of official business. Elara sat straight-backed in a chair that felt too large, too exposed, while the officials arrayed themselves across from her like judges at a tribunal. The lead official, Lord Chancellor Pembroke, studied her with eyes that gave nothing away. Miss Vance, your story has caused quite a disruption. I wasn't aware that exposing attempted murder and systemic abuse qualified as disruption, my lord. His eyebrow raised fractionally. You misunderstand. I'm not criticizing, I'm observing. He leaned forward. In the past 6 weeks, we've received over 300 formal complaints about asylum commitments. Families demanding loved ones be released and examined by independent physicians. Women seeking protection from abusive guardians. Magistrates questioning the legal frameworks we've operated under for generations. Good, Elara said flatly. Is it? You've destabilized an entire social structure. I've exposed rot that was already there. If the structure can't survive sunlight, it deserved to collapse. Silence fell. The other officials exchanged glances. Rowan's hand moved subtly toward his sword, a warning they all understood. Then Lord Pembroke smiled. Her Majesty agrees with you. Elara blinked. What? The Queen has been following your case personally. She was disturbed by what the investigation uncovered. The abuses, the corruption, the complete failure of oversight that allowed women to be imprisoned, tortured, and killed with legal sanction. He pulled a document from his portfolio. She's issued a royal decree establishing new protections. No woman can be committed to an asylum without examination by at least 2 independent physicians. All existing commitments must be reviewed, and she's allocating crown funds to establish a network of refuges for women escaping dangerous situations. The words washed over Elara like waves, each one reshaping the landscape of possibility. The Queen is creating refuges? Inspired by your foundation, yes. She wants to ensure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. Lord Pembroke's expression softened fractionally. You've created a revolution, Miss Vance. Perhaps not the one you intended, but a necessary one nonetheless. I just wanted justice for myself. And in seeking it, you've opened the door for thousands of others to seek the same. He stood, and the other officials followed. Her Majesty wishes to meet you. She's invited you to court next month to discuss the new protections and how your foundation might coordinate with the Crown's efforts. After they left, Elara sat in stunned silence, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She'd expected censure, maybe even legal challenges to her foundation. Instead, she'd been offered royal partnership. The Queen wants to meet you, Rowan said, sounding equally stunned. Elara, do you understand what this means? That my story became bigger than me. That you became impossible to ignore. He pulled her to her feet, his hands warm on her shoulders. You're not just a survivor anymore. You're a symbol, a catalyst for change. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to help people. Then do both. His smile was gentle. Be the symbol that inspires, and the person who does the practical work, you're capable of both. The meeting with the Queen took place in the capital's palace, in a private audience chamber that managed to be both opulent and intimidating. Her Majesty was younger than Elara expected, perhaps 50, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a bearing that radiated controlled power. Miss Vance, please, sit. The Queen gestured to a chair positioned across from her own. I've wanted to meet you since I first read the trial transcripts. Tell me, how are you recovering? The question was so direct, so genuinely asked, that Elara found herself answering honestly. Some days are harder than others. I still have nightmares about the asylum, about falling, but I'm rebuilding, finding out who I am when I'm not just trying to survive. And who is that? Elara met the Queen's eyes. Someone who refuses to let suffering be invisible. Someone who fights. Good. We need fighters. The Queen's expression turned grave. I must confess something, Miss Vance. I knew your mother. Elara's breath caught. You did? She served as one of my ladies-in-waiting before she married your father. A brilliant woman, kind, strong. The Queen's voice softened. When I heard what happened to her daughter after her death, when I learned that Maris Vance had tortured you for 15 years while society looked the other way, I was enraged at the system, at myself for not knowing, not investigating. You couldn't have known. I should have. That's what power is for, to protect those who can't protect themselves. I failed in that duty. She leaned forward. But I won't fail again. These new protections, these refuges, they're not charity, Miss Vance. They're justice. Long overdue justice for every woman who's suffered in silence. They spent 2 hours discussing specifics, funding structures, legal frameworks, how to prevent the new systems from being corrupted the way the old ones had been. The Queen was sharp, pragmatic, and deeply committed to real change. As Elara prepared to leave, the Queen stopped her. One more thing. I'm creating a new position, Royal Advocate for Women's Protection. It would involve overseeing the refuge network, investigating complaints, ensuring the new laws are enforced. The position comes with legal authority, crown funding, and protection from retaliation. She paused. I want you to fill it. Elara stared. Your Majesty, I'm not qualified. You're more qualified than anyone I could appoint. You've lived the reality these women face. You understand the systems that oppress them, and you have the courage to fight, which is the most important qualification of all. The Queen's smile was knowing. Think about it. You don't have to answer now. On the carriage ride back to Thornmere, Elara sat in silence, watching the landscape blur past. Rowan didn't push her to talk, just sat beside her, providing quiet support. I never imagined this, she said finally. Any of this. 6 months ago, I was a prisoner in my own home, counting days until my 25th birthday, and praying I'd survive long enough to reach it. Now the Queen is offering me a position of real power. What do you want to do? I want to say yes. I want to take that power and use it to tear down every system that enabled Maris. I want to make sure no other girl grows up the way I did. She turned to him. But I'm terrified. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I fail? Then you fail, and you get up and try again. Rowan took her hand. Elara, you've already done the impossible. Everything from here is just details. That night, back at Thornmere, Elara walked the grounds alone, thinking. The estate that had become her refuge, the foundation she was building, the position she'd been offered, they all represented choices. Real choices, made freely, without coercion or desperation. She found herself at the cliff's edge again, drawn there by some instinct she didn't question. The sea crashed below, eternal and indifferent. The same sea that had nearly claimed her, the same cliffs that had been her prison and her salvation. I thought I might find you here. Rowan approached from the path, 2 thick cloaks draped over his arm. It's freezing. At least stay warm while you contemplate life-altering decisions. She accepted the cloak gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. Do you think I should accept the Queen's offer? I think you should do whatever makes you feel most alive. He stood beside her, looking out at the water. But I also think you'd be brilliant at it. You have a gift for seeing through facades, for understanding power dynamics, for refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. Those are survival skills, trauma responses. They're also leadership qualities. He turned to face her. Elara, you've spent your entire life believing you were worthless because that's what Maris told you, but she was wrong. You're extraordinary, not because of what you survived, but because of what you built from the ruins. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. If I accept, I'll be traveling constantly, investigating complaints, overseeing refuges, testifying in legal proceedings. I won't be here at Thornmere very often. Then I'll travel with you when I can, and miss you terribly when I can't. His arms came around her. I'm not going to hold you back from your calling because I want you nearby. That would make me no better than the people who tried to cage you. You could never be like them. Good, because I love you too much to limit you. The words were simple, direct, devastating in their honesty. Whatever you choose, whatever path you take, I'm with you, always. Elara made her decision that night, alone in her room with moonlight streaming through the windows. She wrote her acceptance letter to the Queen in careful script, then sealed it before she could second-guess herself. In the morning, she sent it. 3 days later, the official appointment arrived, along with documents establishing her authority and a letter from the Queen expressing satisfaction at her acceptance. Elara Vance, Royal Advocate for Women's Protection. The girl who'd once been invisible now had the power to make others visible too. The first refuge opened 6 months later, built on land adjacent to Thornmere. It was a sprawling complex designed for both safety and dignity. Private rooms instead of dormitories, communal spaces for healing and education, medical facilities staffed by female physicians, legal offices where women could seek counsel without judgment. The dedication ceremony drew crowds from across the territories. Nobles, common folk, journalists, and most importantly, women who needed what this place offered. Elara stood before them all, no longer the terrified girl in rags, but a woman in simple, elegant clothing that spoke of both means and purpose. The scars of her past were still there, in nightmares, in moments of panic, in the way she always positioned herself with her back to walls, but they no longer defined her. This refuge exists because too many women have suffered in silence, she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. Because society has failed to protect those who needed protection most. Because the systems we relied on were corrupted by power and indifference. She paused, meeting the eyes of women in the crowd who wore the same haunted expression she'd once seen in mirrors. But silence ends today. Suffering and isolation ends today. This refuge is more than a building. It's a promise that you will be believed, you will be protected, you will be given the resources to rebuild your life on your own terms. Applause erupted, but Elara wasn't finished. I was pushed off a cliff by someone who was supposed to love me. I survived because one person saw, one person acted, one person refused to let me disappear. But survival shouldn't depend on luck or individual heroism. It should be a right, a guarantee. She lifted her chin. So to every woman listening, if you're trapped, if you're suffering, if you've been told you're worthless or crazy or deserving of punishment, you're not. You're valuable. You're sane. And you deserve safety. Come to us. We'll help you fight. Later, as the crowd dispersed and Elara toured the refuge with its first residents, 12 women ranging from teenage girls to grandmothers, each with stories that echoed her own, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing, exactly. The wounds were too deep, too recent for complete healing, but purpose, direction, a reason for all that suffering that went beyond just personal survival. Miss Vance? A young woman approached, maybe 19, with bruises around her throat that spoke of attempted strangulation. I wanted to thank you. My husband tried to kill me last week. I escaped, but I had nowhere to go until I heard about this place. You saved my life. No, Elara said gently. You saved your own life by escaping. I just provided a safe place to land. Still, the girl's eyes were fierce despite her trauma. Because of you, I have a chance. That's everything. That night, Elara and Rowan stood on Thornmere's balcony, watching lights flicker in the refuge windows. Women settling into safety, beginning the long process of recovery. Do you ever regret it? Rowan asked, taking on this responsibility instead of just living quietly with your fortune. Every single day, Elara admitted. It's exhausting, heartbreaking. Some of the stories I hear make what Maris did seem almost gentle by comparison. And I can't save everyone. Some women aren't ready to leave. Some die before they can. It's brutal. But it matters. It matters that they have somewhere to go, someone who believes them, a system that doesn't automatically side with their abusers. She leaned back against him. I spent 15 years powerless. Now I have power. Using it to help others feels like the only thing that makes sense. You're remarkable. I'm stubborn. There's a difference. I'll take stubborn. His arms came around her waist. Though I have a question that's purely selfish and has nothing to do with saving the world. Ask. Will you marry me? The question hung in the air between them, simple and enormous all at once. Elara turned in his arms, searching his face. Are you sure? I'm not exactly wife material. I'm damaged. I have nightmares. I'll be traveling constantly for work. And my reputation is that of a woman who survived hell and decided to burn down the systems that put her there, which is exactly the kind of reputation I want in a wife. His smile was soft. Elara, I'm not asking you to be some perfect society bride. I'm asking you to be my partner, to build a life together based on choice, not obligation, to face whatever comes next side by side. What about heirs, the succession? I need you. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver with a small blue stone. This was my mother's. It's not flashy, but it's yours if you want it. Elara looked at the ring, at this man who'd saved her life and then given her space to save herself, who'd fought beside her and supported her and never tried to cage her despite having every traditional right to do so. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. The wedding took place the following spring, at Thornmere Hall, transformed into something between a celebration and a political statement. Instead of a traditional society affair, they invited the women from the refuge, the servants who'd testified against Maris, the journalists who'd printed the truth, the officials who'd supported reform. Elara wore blue, the color of the sky after storms, of deep water that held both danger and beauty. Not white, because she wasn't pretending to be some untouched innocent. She was scarred and whole and entirely herself. As she walked down the aisle, alone, because she belonged to no one but herself, she passed faces that told stories. Agnes from the asylum, now working as the refuge's head administrator. Mrs. Blackwood, who'd become something like a mother. Lord Westbrook, who'd ensured justice was served. The Queen herself, in attendance to show Crown support. And at the end of the aisle, Rowan waited with an expression that said he saw all of her, the broken parts and the rebuilt ones, the nightmares and the strength, the survival and the determination to be more than just a survivor. "You look terrifying," he murmured as she reached him. "Good. I worked hard to be terrifying." The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional but meaning something entirely different when spoken by two people who'd chosen each other freely. When Rowan kissed her, the assembled crowd erupted in cheers that spoke less of romance and more of triumph. A victory not just for them, but for everyone who'd been told they were powerless and had proven otherwise. The years that followed were not easy. Elara's work as royal advocate took her across the kingdom, investigating abuse, dismantling corrupt systems, building refuges in cities and towns where women had nowhere safe to turn. She testified before Parliament, fought legal battles, faced death threats from men who saw her as a threat to the natural order. But she also saw change. Real, measurable change. Asylum commitment rates dropped by 60% in the first 2 years. Divorce laws were reformed to allow women to leave abusive marriages without losing everything. The refuge network expanded to cover the entire kingdom, each location run by survivors who understood trauma intimately. And slowly, the stories changed. Instead of letters thanking Elara for giving them courage, she received letters from women who'd left their abusers, reclaimed their lives, built new futures. Women who'd done what she'd done, refused to accept that suffering was inevitable. On her 30th birthday, Elara stood on the cliffs once more, but this time, Rowan wasn't beside her. A small child was, their daughter, barely 3 years old, with dark hair and eyes that held both her mother's determination and her father's steadiness. "Mama, why do you always come here?" the girl asked, holding tight to Elara's hand. "Because this is where I learned I was stronger than I knew," Elara said, lifting her daughter into her arms. "This is where someone pushed me, and I fell, and I survived. And surviving taught me that I could do more than just survive. I could fight. I could change things." "Like your work?" "Like my work. Like building refuges and helping women and making sure people who hurt others face consequences." She pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair. "Someday you'll face your own cliffs, your own moments of falling, and I want you to remember that surviving is just the beginning. What you do after, how you use your survival, your strength, your voice, that's what matters." Below them, the sea crashed endlessly against rocks. The same sea, the same cliffs. But the woman standing here was entirely different from the girl who'd been pushed 5 years ago. That girl had been a victim, a shadow, invisible in her own life. This woman was the royal advocate for women's protection, a wife, a mother, a force that had reshaped laws and saved lives and refused to let suffering remain hidden. Not because she was special or chosen or destined for greatness, but because she'd made a choice. The choice to fight back, to demand justice, to transform personal trauma into systemic change. And in making that choice, she'd become exactly what Maris had always feared she would be: powerful, independent, and absolutely impossible to erase. Rowan emerged from the path behind them, slightly out of breath from chasing their daughter. "There you are. I should have known you'd come here." "It's our anniversary," Elara said, settling their daughter on her hip. 5 years since you caught me falling. Best catch I ever made." He wrapped an arm around both of them, and they stood there as a family, looking out at the horizon where sea met sky in an endless promise of possibility. "What are you thinking about?" Rowan asked softly. "About how I used to count days until my 25th birthday, thinking that was freedom. But real freedom isn't reaching some arbitrary age or inheriting money. It's this, choosing how to spend my time, who to love, what battles to fight, building something that matters." She turned to look at him. "Thank you." for seeing me when I was invisible, for catching me when I fell, for giving me space to become more than just the girl you saved. You saved yourself, he corrected. I just refused to let you die in the process. Their daughter squirmed, wanting down. They set her loose to explore the heather and wildflowers that grew along the cliff path, always watching, but letting her roam. Just as Elara herself had learned to roam. To take up space instead of shrinking. To speak instead of staying silent. To demand rather than endure. The girl who'd been pushed off this cliff was gone, burned away in ice baths and laudanum dreams and the terrible crucible of learning that she could survive anything. In her place stood a woman who'd discovered something Maris never understood, that surviving wasn't the same as living, that victims could become victors, that the fall wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning. And 5 years later, with refuges across the kingdom and laws that protected instead of oppressed, and a daughter who would grow up knowing her own worth, Elara could finally say it with certainty. She hadn't just survived the fall. She'd learned to fly.